The Assembly of First Nations is backing a revised deal with Ottawa to compensate Indigenous people hurt by the First Nations child welfare system. Now, the agreement will boost the initial settlement by nearly $3.5 billion and cover thousands more victims. It would also resolve a long-standing human rights complaint and class action lawsuit. Janice McGregor has more.
This has been an extremely long road. This case goes back to 2007 when lawyer Cindy Blackstock and her First Nations children and family Caring Society, I originally went to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal arguing that there was discrimination in how children who deserved, in their view, on-reserve child welfare services were treated when they were removed from their families and indeed removed from their communities and discriminated against, with all the losses that come with that. Not just the severing of your family ties in that situation, but also the severing of your cultural ties, your language ties, and significantly for some of the kids who had specific health needs and needed extra support, they were not provided equally as the various jurisdictions involved wrangled over who should be paying for these things. That's where what they call Jordan's principle comes in, and originally the Human Rights Tribunal found that indeed payments were due to these kids as a result of discrimination, and then subsequent, as the process went along, the Assembly of First Nations got involved, also went to federal court arguing that there had been discrimination against children in the child welfare system and that this needed to be compensated by the government. And on it went to the point where we now are looking at some 300,000 children and their families who could be compensated by this now over $23 billion settlement that has been reached. There are multiple categories, multiple classes covered by this, and each time sort of when you had a deal or what people thought was a deal and then it was appealed and so on, they've really added to it to the point where now the cases involved, the time frame for that is now some 15 years longer than the original kind of tribunal decision was covering. And they have classes that are not only, compensating the children for what they lost in the services they didn't receive, but also their caregivers, and significantly with these latest editions, the estates of some caregivers, people who have passed on before they could ever kind of see anything done to resolve the inequities here. Here is the Manitoba Regional Chief for the Assembly of First Nations, Cindy Woodhouse, talking about this, along with Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu.
I'm glad that that this government didn't kick this down the road. I'm glad that we settled this in an amicable way rather than in a courtroom. And I think that that's the way that we have to be in this country, is to try and work together and to try and talk to each other at the table rather than in courtrooms.
The revised agreement, as I said, isn't going to make people whole. No amount of money can make people whole, but it is an important piece of healing because it's an acknowledgement of the discrimination.
And Indigenous Crown Relations Minister, interestingly, I thought kind of framed this as something that became a very complex web if you look at sort of the legal issues involved, the political jurisdictional issues involved, but a web that had children at the middle of it. And he said being able to resolve this sends an important signal, he felt, that it is possible to move forward and fix a broken system. In addition to the amounts of this settlement, there is another $20 billion on the table from the federal government now to reform child welfare for First Nations kids, acknowledging not only that you have to pay for the harm done in the past, but you have to fix the system so that children in the future receive help that is more equitable. Miller also paid tribute to Murray Sinclair, who was brought in kind of very late in the game in 2021 while all these different processes were breaking down and no money was going out to kind of get people together, help them set their egos aside, and really reach this final settlement.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa.